that just scratches the surface of what they do. Thank you to the members that provided our breakfast this morning. All right, and our speaker today is Bryson. He's the president and CEO of Catholic Charities of St. Louis. He is currently the past chair of the Missouri Catholic Conference, the Public Policy Committee of the Catholic Bishops of Missouri. He is one of the founding board members of the St. Louis Catholic Leadership Collaborative. Jared and his family, they're parish members here, and their 3 children attend a day school. Dr. Bryson. Ooh, I didn't know. Wow. He holds a Master of Divinity and a doctorate in Christian spirituality. I know I'm looking forward to this discussion. Please welcome our own Jared Bryson.
Oh, perfect, yeah. Am I going to need this? No. All right, good. They usually get in my way. Well, good morning. Thanks for joining me. And I want a big special thanks to the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. I have the privilege in my day job to partner with the Society in many different ways with all the conferences throughout the Archdiocese of St. Louis in the work that we do to help take care of people in poverty and need. So grateful for the active chapter here, or the conference here. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how to love your neighbor when you don't like them. This is going to be a rough topic today. Just kidding. You know, part of what I want to kind of walk through, before I get into that, I want to do a little bit of a commercial. So you knew this would be coming. There's a little bit of handouts over here about Catholic Charities if you're interested. But Catholic Charities is 110 years old, and our mission is to bring healing, help, and hope of Jesus Christ to those in need with compassionate and caring presence. When we talk about all things new in the Archdiocese of St. Louis, we talk about the Catholic presence throughout the Archdiocese. And it's great to focus on parishes and schools, but sometimes we forget that some of the best ways in which we are actually more present to people is in the outreach of our Society of St. Vincent de Paul and of Catholic Charities throughout our community. So just kind of as an aside to that conversation. Part of who we take care of in the Archdiocese is part of Catholic Charities. Again, this is part of the commercial before I get into it. And this is part of also why I'm talking about this topic today. So I want to just talk about some of the people that we take care of on behalf of the Archdiocese and all the Catholic community. So we have a large children and youth division, and in that division of children and youth, we do a lot of adoptions, of course, and behavioral health for kids in residential care. Currently, we have about 45 kids throughout the region that are in our managed care that are wards of the state. And they're not because they're waiting for adoption, it's actually because they're on some sort of plan that really need intense behavioral health management. But we also have very large adoption and pregnancy resource centers that we are part of as well, with Good Shepherd, Children and Family Services, and with Mary Grove. But we also do a lot of things for family and the elderly. You may be well aware of Cardinal Ritter Senior Services and their expansion that continues to work on as well. Some might be familiar with the homeless, more challenging folks and demographic to sometimes work with and deal with. And they show up in St. Louis County. It's not just in the city. So the opportunity for us to kind of walk through and walk with the homeless in their process of possibly finding housing. And we work mainly through St. Patrick's Center, which is one of our agencies. Some other populations it might be difficult for us to work with from time to time. Could be an immigrant community, or veterans, or women and children in domestic or addiction issues. Folks who may need legal assistance. And then as we look at the others living with mental illness and other hearing impairments or other impairments. So in Catholic Charities, we end up on a regular basis walking with folks who are at the margins of society in many ways, and who it may be easy to even sometimes write off because of the decisions that they made. But how do we journey and find Christ and provide healing, help, and hope to those folks in need? So here are some of our ministries that you can see throughout for Catholic Charities, just to kind of do that. Last year alone, we took care of about 98,000 people, and it's really tough to read all those numbers up there. But there were about 1,000 veterans we served, and 53.4% of the people we served live below the federal poverty line, which is $25,000 for a family of 4. So our St. Louis, and that's not just in the city of St. Louis, that's throughout the region, kind of walking through that. So that's enough of the commercial break that I have for today. But I want to talk, that's kind of the backdrop by which we as a church respond to people at the margins and kind of walk through that. But I want to start with this from a different place. I think one of the ways in which we need to understand this can be a very difficult time for all of us. Tuesday cannot get here fast enough. And the fallout from Tuesday cannot go by fast enough. It's a very polarizing time, regardless of where you stand on the issues or what you consider the issues to be. Our political party kind of mindset, the extremities, end up being problematic for all of us. And as Catholics, when we face these conversations, so often we get pulled up into the cultural milieu of what it means to make decisions. So for Catholics, the traditional either-or mentality of our political environment is what we get pitted up against, when in fact our theology calls us to understand it from a both-and reality. And how do we hold some of these tensions in place? When we have acts of hatred and violence committed by extremists or opportunities every day that kind of continue to shock us. Many of us might be even suffering within our own ranks and our own families of what we might feel as something that's just unbridgeable. And as the political zeitgeist around us continues to have an agenda that moves forward, it leaves us kind of bewildered with what should we do. Sometimes, because of our disagreements may be political, we end up in the political way of responding. It only gets amped up more in various ways. Sometimes we think that because of our failure to affirm someone's choices, it might mean that we don't love them. And when we think about that a little bit more, what is it that a Catholic is to do in this context? So how do we love someone as Jesus calls us to love when there's so much hatred around us and even directed toward us? What do we do when people who think we don't love them because we disagree with them? All of those, I'm sure, many of us face on a regular basis. But I want to talk about the real problem for us as Catholics is that we need to understand the problem, quote unquote, of love. And kind of the cultural milieu we find ourselves in the midst of that context. So first, we must remember as a Catholic that it means, in terms of love, for us, love is not primarily a matter of emotion or attraction. It does involve some of that from time to time, but nor is love an endorsement of all of someone's thoughts or actions. Love is not an emotion or a judgment, but it is a matter of the will. And so to love people as a Catholic Christian means wanting to do good for them, and if possible, doing what is good for them. Whatever our feelings are about them or our assessment is for what their choices may be, to love someone who does not love us is difficult. We know that. But it's precisely because our feelings kind of run in the midst of that. And if it's an act of the will, then wanting to know the good for someone means that sometimes even the choices that they do that are not good for them, we don't have to affirm their choices that are not good for them, because sometimes when we affirm those choices, it's an act of cowardice, not of love. For those who have children, you might be well aware that your kids want a lot of things. I have 3 kids. Wonderful, wonderful, lovely kids. Hi, kids. In case this is on live, they might be watching. And they want a lot of things. But for us, as parents, we know that if we kind of give them everything, that's probably not the best solution for us in kind of walking through that. So as we look at those who seem to hate us or love those who disagree with us or we disagree with them, let's look at some things throughout some time real quick. Let's kind of just have some places to root and ground ourselves a little bit. So I want to start in Scripture, and I want to start with the Gospel of Luke just briefly. So Jesus understands well this difficulty of loving those who seem to hate us. His command, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is immediately followed by this caution. For if you love those who love you, what credit is that for you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do the same. Rather, love your enemies and do good to them. It's kind of the premise in which I'm kind of basing much of our conversation this morning on. So this is not easy. Our resentment, even fear of those who do not love us, may make it seem impossible to obey Jesus' command for us. And to either love them or love ourselves. But this is precisely why Jesus gives this command as the second commandment of the 2 great commandments. The first that he gives says this: you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And then he goes in to the second. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 depends all the law of the prophets. It's about the first things, kind of getting the first things right. You can start in many different places in a conversation with somebody. But depending on where you really start, will ferret out the direction you actually finalize in many times. And if you start from the wrong presumptions, then you end up in sometimes the wrong places in the conversation. So I want to talk about our relationship with God as the primary way in which I want to view this. Now, if you really thought I was going to come here and give you some sort of pop psychology advice, I'm not the guy. But I am going to talk to you a little about your prayer and spiritual life a little bit more. Christian spirituality, spiritual direction, that's what I do most of the time. Even though I oversee a social service agency, how I view the work we're about is first and foremost fundamental about our relationship with who God is and who God calls us to be in relationship to God. So before we can mend any human relationships, indeed, even before we can amend our own relationship with God, within ourselves, we must first examine our relationship with God. And what does that look like? So do I pray? And not just pray in the way that we want to get all of the stuff out of our heads and off our hearts and off our minds, but do I pray in a way that's a relationship that invites the heart of the Father to take on my heart? Do I pray, do I come before him with the humility to wonder how I might be a better Catholic Christian today? When I look through my day at the end of the night, when I'm looking back and see all the challenges that I did and all the way in which I handle things, do I look back and say, I really messed that one up? Where God might be calling me to something different? Do I consider the beam in my own eye before I start complaining about my brother or sister? This is one that I have recently kind of sat on in my own reflection a lot. Am I mindful that God personally willed me into existence? And to sit with that for just a few moments. why would such a creator desire to even create me? Am I grateful for that? Do I accept God's offer to help along the road of life? Do I look for a place? Do I aim to see myself in relationship to that eternal source that created me? Now, I think personally this, and actually the church fathers would even say this a little bit more, this kind of self-reflection is essential if we're to understand what it means to love and our relationship in that with others. So, we cannot want the good of others who hate us or who threaten us unless we recognize that they, like us, are daughters and sons of the same God we love with all our hearts, souls, and minds. Those that we don't like so much, those who made bad choices, those who are addicted, those who are poor and outcast, those who are marginalized, those who are LGBTQ, those who are, you name whatever the issue is today. And let me just say, in case you forgot, there are issues out there today. Turn on the news, hit the political cycle, you hear it all. But all of those, all of us, were individually called into existence by the same God in love. God willed us to exist, called for us to exist. It's our common source and destiny to find ourselves in God. Now, that's what makes human community actually possible. That's what it means to establish the kingdom of God. So let's resolve that just a little bit more. As we think about when we're overwhelmed with anxiety, with fear, with stress, with anger, because of the words or actions that someone who does not love us, who does not understand our ways, I think there are some ways in which we need to probably think about how we respond. Now, the one kind of pop psychology moment that I'll give, I guess, now that I think about it, my mom, my wife, my mother-in-law have always said to me many times, take a deep breath before you say that next word. Deep breath. When we get all wound up, sometimes that double-edged sword of the tongue in our mouth becomes the problem itself, right? But what does that really call for us? That deep breath is to take a pause and is an invitation for prayer. It's to pray for that person. It's to pray for this person in the midst of that moment, and to ask God, who knows both, what's good for the other and for myself in this situation. What will bless this moment? And sometimes it's not necessarily what we think it might be. And then if we have an opportunity to do something good for this person, then we should do it. So what do we do when we love the person, but we don't want to affirm their choices? I'm going to go back to my principal analogy around kids. When we think about, for many of us, when we think about praying for our enemies, it might come a little bit easier than agreeing with someone we love about something that's important to them. So enemies can be distant, can be far away, and we can pray for them and feel like we're not engaged. But our family member, who's made some choices that are more difficult for us to live with can be probably more problematic for us on an everyday basis. But if we want to generally the good of the other, then we cannot blindly endorse whatever they may happen to think is good for themselves at a particular moment. This might be what they want. But as any parent knows, going back to that analogies, when we love someone and we give them everything they want, it's not the same at all. Giving a child everything he or she wants is in fact a destructive form of negligence. If you think about some of the things that play out in our family lives when we do that, it becomes problematic. But to love someone is to actually look for their most authentic good. And among the most important of these good is an open door and a welcoming ear. Hospitality becomes the key to bridge in the moment in which we just take the pause, take the deep breath before action. Hospitality is the invitation that God calls to us to take on God's own heart in this moment. Just for those who love us, as in our love for those who hate us, we cannot properly love those with whom we disagree if we're not already loving God rightly. If we believe that Jesus gave the church as a reliable way to help discern the moral oughtness we should be, then we must also understand the role by which the centuries of teaching of the church fathers and others have called us to help discern what the most authentic good is in life. Now we must welcome them first and foremost, continue to share as much of our lives with them, and then prepare. So, we talk about evangelization a little bit, and then prepare to share the truth with them about God's will for them if the time comes when they are ready to hear it and when we are ready to say it in love. So often, when we think about our work and our evangelization, we just want to get our doctrinal statements out and not have the relationship. But it calls us to, as Pope Francis would say, an encounter at the margins. And that encounter doesn't always need to be the one in which we say everything we do is right. But it calls to relationship so that we prepare to proclaim the gospel on good soil. So I want to talk about a couple things. So how do we love in which Jesus has called us to? Part of this Holy Communion for us is that our hearts must be crushed and replaced with God's own heart. It's through receiving the body and blood of Jesus that that God comes to give us a transfusion, if you will, a replacing our own heart and our own blood so that his heart may become what people see in us. So, practices, keeping our eyes on the crucifix, if you will, as you go forward in communion, we think about this is the heart that was moved so much for love of us. That's at our disposal. It's been given to us in a way that it allows those who are very difficult to love be loved. This is what love looks like. It becomes sacrificial. It's an effort of the will. The other is to kind of, as you go forward, is to place yourself and place the situation at the altar. Because we believe Mass is that representation sacramentally of the gift of self, which Jesus made upon the cross. And if we join our prayers in that moment, we also find that we could also transform our hearts to be like Jesus. And in the end, I think we might be asked is if we allow God to transform our own heart and make our heart like his, and did we bring forth his love into this world. So with those instructions in mind, kind of thinking about the challenge itself, I just want to kind of talk about a practice that it's not new. It's also not anything out of the ordinary. It's been talked about for centuries. But I want to talk about adoration a little bit. I want you to understand it from this standpoint. Because so often our own ego gets involved in these issues of dealing with folks we don't love or we don't like their decisions. God, who is all-powerful, all-knowing, all of those things, humbled himself to become a human. And even more so, to become represented, to become truly present in bread and wine at a Eucharistic table that is being held up, broken, poured out, and shared. Think about bread around your own house right now. Or think about bread in general. It doesn't move itself. It has to be given out. It has to be handed on. It's pushed, even on the altar table, the watch. They move the paten over here, they move the cup over here, they take it around. God emptied himself to become humble enough. We go to the Eucharist as beggars, our hands outstretched, so that when we can go out from that Eucharist to see Christ in the beggar, we can take that word beggar out of the picture, but it could mean anyone at this point in time that we don't really have agreement with, people we don't like. Do what we're that. So we're a complex people. Everything that we do is very complex. I have moments in which internally I'm trying to move to be more compassionate, more forgiving, more loving, and something happens. I blow. I just had enough, right? I become super frustrated. I become impatient. I didn't pause before I said the next word. I didn't do the right things. So there has to be some of this alignment that's brought about in our own lives. And sometimes aligning the internal and the external takes a lot of time. And recognizing that we're all in a path to what that might be, somewhere along the way. The struggle to align our inner and outer life is a lifelong journey. We're not all going to ever arrive there anytime soon, unless tomorrow is our day, or today is our day. Got to pause on that, right? A reminder that this is not just a battle with ourselves. And so often when people look at prayer, fasting, or almsgiving, they see it as this kind of personal attainment. I'm in a personal life of affection and perfection that I'm going to work myself toward. But let's just be very honest as well that prayer, fasting, and almsgiving is not about a self-improvement plan alone. It's also about our resistance with the evil one and the ways in which we need to resist our own ego and the societal pressures around us that kind of force that on. Resistance is both an internal and external reality. What truly moves our alignment is resistance. Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. I might also say to you, if there isn't resistance going on, then you might want to reconsider whether or not you're really doing the work. When we pray, we resist the ability or the mentality of being so self-sufficient and so in charge as we wait quietly to listen to the voice of God, to guide us, to have our heart grow in God's compassion, God's image. When we resist that morsel of food, we fast to prepare our hearts for an even more sumptuous eternal banquet. And then when we give alms, we resist the temptation to build up wealth, to find ourselves to be in solidarity with those who are poor at the margins. These have been ways that have been moved people along the journey for centuries. Now, I would suggest to you that just because we're in 2022 doesn't mean those ways have went away. They are still true and proven. I think it was in the Brothers Karamazov that it says, this is proven, this is true, and it's a very long text. And it's about the spiritual ways that ends up with prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. But I also want to suggest a little bit more, a little deeper route. And this is the scariest route. Because prayer, fasting, and almsgiving for some seem like something we can always figure out and be fine with and kind of work through. But then what happens with prayer, fasting, and almsgiving is that it moves us to a different level of silence and solitude. Now, this is the creepy factor. When's he going to talk? What ends up happening with silence and solitude in our day? It seems that people are always more connected today. Phone, the watch, it tells me everything this phone says. The laptop, just wait, we'll have more. It appears that we're a little bit more afraid of the silence and solitude in our day. And when we get to that moment, we start, I'm going to do this. It's Lent. I'm going to spend 30 minutes every day in silent prayer. And the first 10 minutes, your head is going kind of crazy. You've got all of this stuff kind of working out. The noise within comes in. This can be a scary experience for folks. And today, it's even scarier. Because there's always something pinging at folks, especially our young folks. I watch it with my own kids. And this is my favorite line in my house. Boredom is great. No screen time. Boredom is great. And what happens after about 20 minutes of boredom is that I find that they're now over doing something creative over here in the corner. Or they're playing together. Holy cow. They're talking to each other like human beings. Silence can be scary. But the purpose of solitude and silence is not to react to the internal or external stimuli that's coming up in our heads and our hearts, but it's to know our true identity at a greater depth. So solitude allows us to go deeper until we find peace. Now this is to discover ourselves to be beloved, to find ourselves in a different space, and to return to that space in love as we encounter another person. Silence is not about a call to be quiet, but it's to allow the emptiness inside of us to be filled with the heart of God. To grow in that loving moment. To embrace it. So much so that that becomes our truest identity. It is in the deep solitude and silence that we can find gentleness with which we can truly love our brother and sister, as Thomas Merton says about silence when it comes to interior solitude. And you can see the quote there. If you can't, there we go. When society is made up of men who know no interior solitude, it can no longer be held together by love. And consequently, it is held together by violent and abusive authority. But when men are violently deprived of solitude and freedom, which are their due, their society in which they live becomes putrid. It festers with servility, resentment, and hate. Wow, how does that ring true for today? Silence and solitude provide a gift of loving our neighbor. It provides us our own identity, to hear people and to hear deeper voices about ourselves being united to the deeper voice of the other and ultimately to God. Silence and solitude are what we need each day to begin to turn the tide of destruction, of the destructive narrative that we're on today. Turn off the political ads. Turn off the TV. Now, I'm not a Luddite. I still have to watch all of the news and all that stuff, but how I have to shift what consumes my day is very different. So to be silent enough to observe the particularity of your place. Some may already know your neighbors. Literally, your physical neighbor, you know, the one that has a 6-foot fence that you can't see them over. When's the last time you had them over? When's the last time you sat in the driveway? Some of you might have just been in Halloween, right? But to know the particularity of our place, I have a chair downstairs on my patio that it faces right now toward my neighbor's backyard and my backyard in this one little corner where I have some flowers planted. And I like to sit there throughout the year and watch the sun just kind of come across those flowers that are now dead. But just to see the changing of the seasons, to kind of get to know my identity in that particular place. To love the place where you dwell so much so that you can recognize your interconnectedness to that place. For it's only from this particular place, from this place of St. Francis, from this identity that we come to know ourselves, that we can heal the world. It's not something just that we send out to the mission fields way out there, but it starts here. We can heal all living things if we only take the time for silence and solitude and heal ourselves and come to know our true identity in love, not loneliness. For solitude and silence do not remove it, but solitude unites us to the hearts of all. So I think we try kind of invite ourselves to have that moment. So as I'm going to wrap up, the last thing I'll do, I'm going to invite us to a moment of silence and solitude. As I kind of I'm going to ask you to reflect about holding your mind's eye. The person, the situation, whatever it is that you are challenged with the most. Challenged with the most. This is not confession moment. I don't want to hear about it. I want you just to hold them in your mind's eye. And we're going to have a few moments of silence and solitude. I'm going to walk you through a reflection. And then I'll wrap up for some questions and comments. Holding that person or situation in your mind, recognizing that that is a fellow human being, just like you. I invite you to silently repeat after me these phrases as you hold that person in your mind. This person has a body and mind just like me. This person has feelings, thoughts, and emotions just like me. This person has, during his or her life, experienced physical and emotional pain and suffering, just like me. This person has at some point been sad, just like me. This person has been disappointed in life, just like me. This person has sometimes been angry, just like me. This person has been hurt by others, just like me. This person has felt unworthy and inadequate at times, just like me. This person worries, just like me. This person is frightened, just like me. This person will die, just like me. This person has longed for friendship, just like me. This person is learning about life, just like me. This person wants to be caring and kind to others, just like me. This person wants to be content with life as given, just like me. They want to be free from pain and suffering, just like me. This person wishes to be happy, just like me. This person wishes to be safe, strong, and healthy, just like me. This person wishes to be loved, just like me. I now take some time to let some wishes for this person just arise in your spirit, your being. What's the good that you intend for them? I wish that they have the strength, the resources, the social support to navigate the difficulties in life with ease. I wish that they would have the strength to be free from pain and suffering. I wish that they will be happy and peaceful. I wish that they would come to know God and know themselves intimately as loved by God. Whoever this person is in your life, you've brought them to mind. Now in your mind's eye, thank them. Reverence the holy within. Acknowledge where God might be leading you to attend with the ear of God's heart to love them more. And with that, I thank you. Any questions or thoughts or comments? I know we're right at time, so pause. Yeah.
What are you doing with the immigrants and with what other organizations like the International Institute do you work with that group of people?
Sure. So immigrant populations at this point in time, the International Institute does the refugee resettlement part, so that's the first 90 days in which they're, and then from that point, then Catholic Charities helps walk them through various ways in which they might need resources in the community, or kind of walk through documentation process, or if they're working on asylum, we help in the legal cases for their asylum and their paperwork process. We had a wonderful opportunity just this past week to work with the Mexican consulate out of Kansas City to help with folks. There's about 1 million Mexican citizens living in the United States, actually right here in the St. Louis region, and to helping them obtain the right documentation so they can be in the community in different ways and have work visas and stuff like that. So we're working through that process.
I was just sitting here thinking from our 2,500 ornaments on the giving tree, the white ones are St. Vincent de Paul, and most of those are picked up by the St. Vincent de Paul Society here. We have the red ones that are St. Francis Community down by Vigo Mill, so we have those immigrants there who are needing help, and the Vietnamese who are needing help. We also have the lime green ones, which are expected care and services, and the purple ones are Good Shepherd, and then the orange ones are St. Elizabeth's Hall. So you can take lots of those ornaments, are especially needed, but the other 5 organizations need stuff too. But until I sat here, did I realize we work with 5 Catholic charity organizations.
Right. Yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you. Others? Well, thank you so much for your time. I know we're about 10 minutes before Mass, so if those who want 11 o'clock Mass, which is me, give you a few more times to kind of make that transition. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you.